My name is Mary Ann Hinsdale. I'm the director of the Institute of Religious Education and Pastoral Ministry here at Boston College, a professor in the Theology Department, and I also belong to a religious community as a vowed sister in the Catholic community, the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I say that because there's so many titles and descriptions I sometimes have. I think it's especially appropriate tonight. We're very happy to welcome you to the third in a series sponsored by the Church in the 21st Century Initiative on sexuality and the Christian tradition. The first two presentations focused, the first one was an introduction, which was about 2 weeks ago. The second presentation was entitled Why Get Married, which was held last week. Tonight's presentation is called Why Celibacy, a Comparative Perspective. And on April 28th, which is a Monday, we will be having a presentation, the last in the series, on homosexuality in a Catholic context, what has been said about it, and what else can be said. And that will be held in Robsham Theater with Andrew Sullivan and David Morrison. For this evening's presentation, I'm very happy to welcome, speaking from the Roman Catholic perspective, Father Howard Gray of the Society of Jesus, Swami Tyagananda, from the Hindu perspective, and Geshe Tsetan from the Buddhist perspective. Our first speaker will be Howard Gray, who is currently the rector of the Jesuit community at John Carroll University outside Cleveland, Ohio, where he serves as assistant to the president for University Mission and Identity. Prior to these positions, Father Gray has been involved in a number of leadership positions within the Jesuit order, including Director of Formation, Rector of the Weston Jesuit School of Theology, and Professor of Theology there. From 1983 to 89, he was the Provincial Superior of the Detroit Province of the Society of Jesus. He has also been Vice President of the National Conference of Major Superiors of Men, and he has been a consultant to the Jesuit provinces of East Asia in their efforts to coordinate educational, formational, and social works. In 1990, he became the director of the Tertianship program for the Jesuits and held that position until 1996. Father Gray, as many of you know, is no stranger to Boston College. In 1996, he was named a Fellow of the Jesuit Institute, and then from 1997 until 2001, he was the first director of Boston College's Center for Ignatian Spirituality. During this time, he was the project director for Boston College's Lilly Grant, which was received to study the theological implications of vocation, and that grant has resulted in a $2 million award for a 5-year implementation program that is known as Intersections here on Boston College's campus. I'd like to welcome back and ask you to help me do that, Father Howard Gray.
Well, good evening to all of you. In her memoir, Virgin Time, Virginia Hampel explores the reclamation of her spiritual life through 3 pilgrimages, to Assisi, to Lourdes, and to the Trappisting community in Redwoods, California. It is in the third of these pilgrimages at Redwoods that Hampel recounts a particular moment of insight at evening prayer. There, in the dark chapel, a solitary nun enters, reverences the altar, and lights a large single candle. Hampel muses that the candle is not there for light, because it illumines only the section of the chapel immediately surrounding its stand. Nor is the candle there for warmth, for its heat only extends a few inches from the flame. But rather, the candle is there for focus, to draw the attention of the congregation to the altar as a place of prayer. Hampel concludes her reverie by noting that this is what the life of these contemplative nuns is about, giving focus to something beyond themselves. And I want to use this narrative to explain what I'm going to offer this evening in my presentation on celibacy within the Roman Catholic tradition. First, I'm going to use Canon 277 from the 1983 Code of Canon Law, not because it gives a comprehensive treatment of celibacy and not because it offers a spiritually moving exposition of the experience of being celibate, but rather because it provides a focus for the time we have at our disposal about a topic hard to compress in 20 minutes. Canon 277 reads, "Clerics are obliged to observe the perfect and perpetual continence for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, and therefore are obliged to observe celibacy, which is a special gift of God, by which sacred ministers can adhere more easily to Christ with an undivided heart, and can more easily and freely dedicate themselves to the service of God and humankind." This canon offers a succinct statement of what celibacy is, that is, a perfect and perpetual continence, the abstinence from sexual expression or genital expression, and why celibacy exists for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, to adhere more easily to Christ with an undivided heart, and more freely to dedicate oneself to the service of God and to humankind. In his October 28, 2002 America article, Some Basics About Celibacy, John O'Malley cited 3 decisive moments in the history of celibacy within Roman Catholicism, from the patristic period to the Middle Ages, with an emphasis on continence for married clergy. Secondly, the Gregorian Reform, which led to the absolute prohibition of marriage for those in sacred orders. And thirdly, the period of the Protestant Reformation, with its denunciation of celibacy as having no justification in the New Testament and as responsible for the debauchery of the clergy. What the canon does not present, and what O'Malley suggests, is a sense of historical process. It is a historical process that the Church engaged in with its culture and with its understanding of sexuality at these particular modes. What the canon does not catch is some of the evolving interpretations that mark this historical process. And it's these historical interpretations that I want to deal with now. First, celibacy is a symbol of living for the kingdom of God. A person dedicated to a love transcending this world and living faithfully in that commitment can witness to the power of God to call and to sustain a way of life. Second, a public declaration that this call follows the example of Christ can witness to the mission of all Christians to find in Christ the way, the life, and the truth. Third, when this dedication is coupled with a life of genuine service to God and to the neighbor, then it can witness to the action of the Spirit, drawing all Christians to prayer, to worship, and to the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. For many years, these were the kinds of devotional and religious arguments used to explain celibacy. They said something helpful about what remained a special gift from God. But these devotional assertions or theological suggestions needed more context. For example, Rowan Williams has wisely warned us that symbols, like saying celibacy is a symbol of the kingdom of God, symbols can make reality abstract. For example, if we can typify people as members of an evil empire or as a godless nation, then it's easy to bomb these symbols, forgetting that they were first of all, before being symbols, people. People with families and jobs, people with hopes and dreams, just like us. The people who promise to be celibate for the kingdom may witness to the kingdom of God, but they did not cease being people. Renunciation without gentleness and compassion can become an endurance contest. Renunciation of sexual love without a concomitant humanity and availability can become a narcissistic spiritual athleticism. Similarly, the following of Christ honors not only what he gave up, but to whom he gave: the poor, the marginal, the cripple, the foreigner, the self-righteous. Celibacy has to be Christ-like in the way that it liberates our human attention and our human responses. Moreover, it has to be something that unites the community as one in its total baptismal commitment to reflect all the aspects of Christ's presence and Christ's service. Therefore, it is a call not to any elitism, but to a humble sense of being part of the bigger body of Christ. Third, the availability to service that celibacy can provide is not the exclusive prerogative of celibates. John Paul II developed the idea of complementarity of marriage and of celibacy. Most celibates have brothers, sisters, and friends who remind them of the profound availability demanded in every workable marriage, in raising children, in fulfilling one's profession, in making neighborhoods a community. In short, in the life we call lay, we find equal demands that there be Christian availability. Finally, the disclosures of sexual misconduct have radically rocked the assurances that the people of God once had that the declaration of public celibacy signified a private life of integrated celibacy. So public and private came together in a kind of harmony. When I was ordained in 1961, people believed that I stood for a love that they could trust. Many no longer believe in that kind of celibate love. Others want to believe, but their trust has been wounded. Still others have argued that celibacy needs to be re-examined as a prerequisite for ordained ministry. On the one hand, people like the late Richard Shaner challenged the assertion that celibacy is the only way to live priestly ministry, seeing celibacy as a discipline with an honorable tradition, but without ultimate necessity for the life or for ministry as priesthood. Others, echoing the Protestant reformers, seem to blame celibacy for the sexual misconduct found among clergy and among male religious. The result is that we are willy-nilly in a period of profound re-examination, not only of what celibacy does, but also of what celibacy means. This re-examination of celibacy has to be a chore for the entire Catholic community, not only its ecclesiastical leadership. For the radical question celibacy addresses is, how do the people of God understand chastity as the virtue that guides sexual appetite? It's not right to ask that only one segment of the community tackle this question, and that's why we have this forum. Celibacy is linked to chastity, and chastity is linked to the way we all interpret how we want to live our sexuality within this culture. How do we want to live our sexuality within this culture for the sake of the kingdom? How do we want to live our sexuality in this culture in the light of Christ? How do we want to live our sexuality in order to be freer to serve our brothers and sisters? This kind of reflection brings us full circle to sexuality and to the church in the 21st century. The Holy Father, I think, has it right. We need to see the issues of celibacy in a wider cultural context as part of the sexual asceticism of the entire church, as the complementary call to be sexually integrated, all of us, with our gospel discipleship, those of us who are Catholic Christians. There's one more task that I was asked to perform to relate all this to my own experience as a Jesuit priest. The celibacy of religious life priesthood is enfolded in the vow of consecrated chastity, which in turn is part of a triad that includes poverty and obedience. Chastity forms a style of apostolic presence. My Jesuit life has helped me to formulate this apostolic presence as, first of all, a life that says people are more important than things. That's the positive aspect of poverty, of giving up private ownership. Secondly, that people deserve to be loved with a love that they can trust, and that's chastity. And thirdly, that the imagination and ambition I bear are nothing to the ambition and imagination God holds out for me in community, and that's obedience. Sometimes in trying to explain this triad to people far from my life, I feel awkward, as if I'm posing. Sometimes when I read or hear something disparaging about priestly celibacy or religious life commitment, I feel powerless. Sometimes when I confront my own compromises and failures in the whole vowed life enterprise, I am simply embarrassed. But mostly I feel that the great gift of living in awkward times, that I have a grace that I have tried to be faithful, and that means a lot. I began this reflection with an illustration from Virgin times, that of the candle in the Trappistine monastery. The candle represented the lives of those nuns giving focus to God's presence in the midst of the world. Let me extend this illustration more directly to celibacy. For celibacy, as the Church reminds us, is a gift from God, and therefore another instance of God's freedom. Celibacy is a gift that takes a lifetime to unpack, a gift you have to unwrap. Tonight's interreligious conversation reminds us, too, that celibacy is God's gift for many lifetimes beyond Catholicism. Ultimately, then, it is a gift that celebrates the mystery of God's most universal call, that we look seriously at our sexual appetite and the way in which that appetite can give us energy to be people of love. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Howard. Our next speaker is Swami Tyagananda, a monk of the Ramakrishna Order of India. He is the head of the Vedanta Society here in Boston and is the Hindu chaplain at MIT and Harvard. He is also the current president of the United Ministry at Harvard University and director of the Harvard Hindu Fellowship. Prior to coming to the United States, Swami Tyagananda was for 11 years the editor of the English language journal Vedanta Kesari, based in Chennai, India. He has translated and edited 10 books, including Values, The Key to a Meaningful Life, and The Essence of the Gita. He joined the Ramakrishna Order at its Bombay ashrama in the year 1976 after graduating from the University of Bombay. Swami Tyagananda is a member of the American Academy of Religion and on the board of the Society for Hindu Christian Studies. He's presented papers at academic conferences and gives lectures and classes at the Vedanta Society, as well as at MIT, Harvard, and other colleges in and around Boston. Currently, he is writing a book entitled Kali's Child Revisited: Questions of Language, Cultural Understanding, and Documentation, a book which deals with cross-cultural studies, especially those related to interpretation, translation, and documentation. Please help me welcome Swami Tyagananda.
Thank you for that introduction. Whenever I am invited to present a Hindu view on anything, I find it convenient to begin by explaining what my own name means, because it is an unusual name in the West, difficult to pronounce and unintelligible to most people. The first part of my name, Swami, is the epithet used for Hindu monks, and the word means master. It points to the ideal of being a master of oneself, or being in control of oneself. The second part of my name is my actual name, which was given to me when I received my final vows of sannyasa, or monastic life. Tyagananda is a combination of two words, Tyaga and Ananda. Tyaga means detachment or letting go, and Ananda means bliss. Taken together, the word means the joy of detachment. Again, it points to the ideal of letting go of all the non-essentials in order to focus on and hold on to the essentials. My name thus serves me as a reminder of two ideals, self-mastery and letting go. Both these are involved in the practice of celibacy as understood in the Hindu way of life. I am a Hindu monk, and as all monks do, I have taken a formal vow of celibacy. I should make it clear that I am a monk and not a priest. In the Hindu tradition, monastic duties and priestly duties are different and distinct. Monastics are always celibate. Priests don't have to be. Indeed, most Hindu ceremonies need a married priest. An unmarried or a divorced priest, or a priest who is a widower, is not eligible to perform religious ceremonies in the Hindu tradition. Hindu monks are exempt from most rituals and ceremonies connected with the social aspect of religion. Their primary duty is toward the spiritual aspects of religion, which includes transforming the inner life through prayer, meditation, and study, and sharing their insights with other spiritual seekers. In ancient times, Hindu monks lived outside the social structure. Their contact with society was minimal. Those interested in spiritual life sought instruction from the monks, and others just left them alone. Monks lived on alms and led austere lives. In the last 100 years or so, Hindu monasticism has undergone a change. While a significant number of monks and nuns still follow the traditional pattern, many nowadays function within the social structure. They don't go out begging for food, but engage themselves in activities designed to serve the needy sections of society. Monks and nuns don't take up salaried jobs, and they look upon their work not as social service, but as a part of their spiritual practice. If God is present in the hearts of all beings, then serving others should be no different from worshipping the divine present in them. This is the philosophy that guides the programs of the Ramakrishna order to which I belong. The order is named after the Hindu saint Ramakrishna, who lived in India in the 19th century. It was his disciple, Vivekananda, who came to this country exactly 110 years ago and started the Vedanta societies. The Ramakrishna order currently has about 2,000 monks staying in many countries around the world. Hindu monks take the vow of poverty and celibacy. The Sanskrit word for celibacy is brahmacharya, which literally means dwelling in Brahman. What do I mean by Brahman? What does dwelling in mean? And how is it practiced? In order to answer these questions, it is necessary to understand the Hindu worldview. Let us begin with a few key concepts. In Hinduism, the ultimate reality is called Brahman. Brahman is not the name of a person. It's not a state to be attained. It is not a place to be reached. Literally, the word simply means that which is vast. It is used to denote pure consciousness. Why pure consciousness? By that is meant not the consciousness of something, but consciousness itself. Understood thus, Brahman, or consciousness itself, is undivided, all-pervading, birthless, and deathless. The characteristics of Brahman are better described by another word, Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss, absolute. Brahman is not merely consciousness itself, but also existence itself and bliss itself. To be dwelling in Brahman is the same as being one with existence, consciousness, and bliss. Oneness with existence removes the threat of being reduced to non-being or nothingness, which is what death looks like. Oneness with consciousness removes the threat of being reduced to dust, the eventual fate of any human body. And oneness with bliss removes the threat of sorrow and suffering in this life and the afterlife. Satchit Ananda, or being, consciousness, bliss, absolute, is not just the ultimate reality, it is also the present reality of you and me and all of us. Our current experience, of course, doesn't correspond to what I just said. We don't see ourselves as being, consciousness, bliss, absolute. We see ourselves as just ordinary human beings, weak, imperfect, and vulnerable to forces outside of ourselves. According to Hindu teachers, this happens because something is obstructing us from getting in touch with our true reality. My true reality is my real self, the real me, which is different from the ego. The Hindus see the ego as a function of the mind. They don't see the mind as the real me. According to them, the mind is still outside, or is a kind of covering over the real me, which is sometimes called the true self, to distinguish it from the ego, or the divine self, to distinguish it from our human limitations. And writing, the S is usually capitalized. The Sanskrit word for the true self, or the divine self, is Atman. That is the only spiritual part of the human personality. By spiritual, I mean non-material. Both the body and the mind are the material parts. That the body is made of material parts is perhaps easy to understand. But it may sound strange that even the mind is material. According to the Hindu tradition, the mind is not visible the way body is because it is made of subtle matter. Our sense organs have their limitations, and so we cannot see the mind the way we can see the body. The mind is similar to the body in many ways. Both undergo changes, for better or worse. Both are subject to illness. Both get tired and need rest. Both can produce joy and sorrow. The most obvious difference between the body and the mind is that one can be seen while the other can only be felt. Hindu thinkers attribute this not to a difference in kind, but in degree. They say that both the body and the mind are material, one made of gross matter and the other of subtle or fine matter. both the body and mind cover, or at least seem to cover, the Atman, the spiritual self, which is why our true identity remains hidden from us. The Hindus say that the goal of life, or the supreme consummation of life, is reached when we have a direct experience of our true nature as divine beings, and when we dwell continually in that blessed experience. Those who attain this state are called enlightened. These are the people who are truly in the state of brahmacharya, because they are truly dwelling in Brahman. The body and the mind limit the full manifestation of our divine nature. It's a big climb down, really. Imagine being reduced to a miserable, bound, imperfect, and mortal human being from our original status as the blissful, free, perfect, and immortal divine being. This is the Hindu version of the myth of the fall and the consequent expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. For Hindus, spiritual life is a conscious and voluntary effort to go back to our original state of joy and freedom, pristine purity and perfection. For this spiritual journey to be successful, every hurdle on the way needs to be overcome and transcended. Hurdles and obstacles, there will be plenty, as any spiritual seeker can testify. But the root problem is the chronic forgetfulness of our joyful spiritual identity and the amazing attachment to our frail, sorrow-ridden human identity. What makes us human are, of course, our human body and the human mind, which includes, of course, the intellect and the ego. My human identity is inseparably connected with perceiving my body and my mind as me. Every demand of the body and mind is considered my demand. And in the process, the spiritual self within is forgotten. My body-mind complex become my de facto self. The practice of brahmacharya, or dwelling in Brahman, involves moving away from the body-mind complex, which is the false self, and getting toward Atman, the true self. What makes the moving away process difficult is the strong claim that the body and the mind exert over me, the constant demands that they make of me. Indeed, it's difficult for most of us to even conceive of our existence apart from our body-mind experience. Our actions and thoughts throughout the day keep us preoccupied with either the body or the mind or both. Hunger and thirst, rest and work, joy and sorrow, ambition and frustration, likes and dislikes. Who has been free from the demands and pressures of these? The body and mind make their presence felt through all of these and more. But the intensity of sexual desire is often more powerful and more persistent than that of our other needs. So the meaning of brahmacharya often gets narrowed down to sexual abstinence. Sex plays an important part in human life, and it often absorbs much of our thinking, feeling, and willing. In Hinduism, it is customary to view most things at three levels: physical, mental, and verbal. Brahmacharya or celibacy includes sexual abstinence at all these levels. Celibacy thus is not limited to merely physical abstinence from sex, but also non-indulgence in sexual fantasy and sexual talk. Body, mind, and speech are interconnected, and they tend to influence one another. When these three become compartmentalized and disconnected, the result is disharmony, which often leads to mental stress and anxiety, physical illness, and unhealthy interpersonal relations. This description of brahmacharya may be all right for monks and nuns, but what about those who are not monastics and who choose to get married? Does this ideal not apply to them? The Hindu tradition believes that the ideal of brahmacharya is relevant to all, but its application for monastic life is different from the one for married life. Marriage is not a license to throw all restraints to the winds. Chastity and fidelity are the foundation on which a strong and happy marital relationship can be built. Bhagavata, a 10th century Hindu text, has this message for the married. Among the duties of a married person are the practice of brahmacharya except for the purpose of procreation, austerity, purity, contentment, and friendliness toward all. In a world full of temptation, if a person can fulfill these duties, he or she can get the same benefits that a monastic does through a sincere practice of celibacy. Since brahmacharya is about self-restraint, it doesn't really matter to whom one feels sexually attracted or with whom one has a committed long-term relationship. Sex is sex, whether heterosexual, homosexual, or unisexual. For spiritual seekers of every persuasion, the ideal is still brahmacharya. As we have seen, the ideal is not about sex per se. It means dwelling in Brahman, or dwelling in the experience of our identity as Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss, absolute. The troubled times in which we live today may give the impression that the brahmacharya ideal is unattainable. It seems out of reach for non-monastics, and one may question whether it is attainable even for those who choose to be monks and nuns. The Hindu tradition addresses this legitimate doubt by pointing out that the ideal of brahmacharya is no more difficult today than it was at any time in the past. It's always been difficult, and it probably always will be. But there are, in every generation, people who have lived up to this ideal, and that gives hope to the rest of us. Secondly, the ideal of brahmacharya, although relevant for all, is not mandatory for all. Not everyone feels the call to practice brahmacharya, and those who do have options and a graded system of employing it in their own lives. For those who choose monastic life in the Hindu tradition, the rules are most stringent and uncompromising. If one finds that these are too difficult to follow, as many do sooner or later, they have the freedom to choose a different lifestyle, where the rules are somewhat relaxed. In marriage, the emphasis is on fidelity, remaining faithful to one's spouse. Indeed, the glory of chastity and the spiritual power it can generate have been described in great detail in Hindu history as well as mythology. What are the benefits of celibacy? What exactly happens when a person practices brahmacharya? The yoga traditions of Hinduism have made a deep study of this. According to them, the sexual impulse and the human energy that fuels it, when checked and controlled, become converted into a refined, subtle power called in Sanskrit ojas. A yogi tries to transform all the sexual energy into ojas through the practice of celibacy. It is only celibacy, or chastity in the case of the married, that causes the ojas to rise and be stored in the brain. Lack of chastity produces loss of mental vigor and moral strength. According to the Hindu tradition, if one practices brahmacharya for 12 years, a special nerve called Medha Nadi in Sanskrit is developed. This produces spiritual intuition, a strong memory, and a remarkable capacity to grasp the subtle realities of life. It may not make a person an intellectual prodigy or a wrestler, but it definitely makes him or her healthy, both physically and mentally. For the sustained practice of contemplation, our brain needs to be strong and calm. And this becomes possible through brahmacharya because it provides nourishment and vigor to the brain. It also nourishes our creative energy and makes it flow on a higher plane. The validity of these claims is borne out by the actual experience of people who have practiced brahmacharya. Having been a celibate all my life and with a formal vow of celibacy since the last 27 years, I can only nod in agreement from what little I have seen in my own life's experience and from the lives of others known to me. It is needless to say that the ideal of celibacy, like any other ideal, has its own challenges and pitfalls. These challenges have to be faced head-on and the pitfalls have to be avoided. This has to be done by both individuals as well as institutions. Among the things important to keep the ideal of celibacy untarnished are the following. 1. Motivation. There is a saying in Sanskrit, prayojanam anuddishya na mandopi pravartate, which means even a stupid person does not do anything unless there is a motive. Practicing celibacy is not simply a matter of keeping one's vow or abiding by the rules of an institution. It is not a question of what one should do. The question is, do I really want to do it? The impulse has to come from within. For that to happen, the practitioner has to be clear about why he or she is practicing celibacy. In the Hindu tradition, the practice of celibacy is considered a must, even if it is practiced in a graded manner to transcend our human limitations and to regain our divine identity. A second factor needed to keep the ideal of celibacy untarnished is spiritual longing. Motivation and hunger go together. I cannot be motivated to eat unless I'm hungry for food. I cannot be motivated to study unless I'm hungry for knowledge. Similarly, I cannot be motivated to practice celibacy unless I'm hungry for the spiritual ideal. Or in theistic language, I long to commune with God. Burning love for God is the greatest aid in the practice of celibacy. With love of God in the heart, no challenge is too difficult. Without it, every step can become potentially slippery. Armed with God's grace, we can attain any ideal. Without His grace, we cannot be certain about anything, not even the next moment or the next breath. The third factor is detachment. Allurements can come in many guises and from many directions. Unless we look deeply and analyze what is essential and what is non-essential in our lives, we won't know what we must keep and what we need to trash. Wealth and fame, power and possessions may have their utility, but a spiritual seeker learns to deal with them with detachment. Monastics in the Hindu tradition take a vow and remind themselves about it daily to renounce the desire for wealth, fame, and sensual enjoyment. This obviously does not apply to all. It doesn't apply to non-monastics. What does apply to everyone is the necessity to arrange one's priorities in life in order of importance, depending on what one perceives as the goal and purpose of one's existence. The fourth factor is self-restraint. Daily reminders of one's vows would be meaningless unless these are backed up by a lifestyle that is in harmony with one's spiritual ideal. Swami Brahmananda, the first spiritual head of the order to which I belong, gave this advice to those who wish to practice brahmacharya. Avoid exciting food, oversleep, overexercise, laziness, bad company, and useless conversation. Hindus have given much thought to the effect food has on the body and mind, even going to the extent of experimenting which food has what effect on us. Accordingly, they have classified certain foods, onion and garlic for instance, as exciting food, meaning that these stimulate passions and restlessness. Sometimes we may not feel the immediate effect of these foods in our lives, and that's only because of the desensitization of the body that has already taken place. So many of these subtle changes occurring due to either ideas or food entering into our stomach or in our mind, we don't feel the impact of it at once. The Hindu thinkers also found that overdoing of anything, be it physical exercise or sleep, is injurious to spiritual life. Hence the advice to practice moderation in everything. Finally, higher creativity. Every one of us has been endowed with creative energy, and we have the freedom to decide how to express that creativity. In most people, at least a portion of the creative energy gets expressed through sex at the physiological level. But it is possible to express it through other channels, such as art, music, and scholarly pursuits. One who wishes to practice brahmacharya must learn to give a higher turn to one's creative energies. This helps to keep the mind on a higher plane. I have mentioned 5 factors which are helpful in the practice of celibacy: motivation, spiritual longing, detachment, self-restraint, and higher creativity. The rules and traditions of Hindu monastic life in particular, and spiritual life in general, have incorporated all of these factors to facilitate the practice of brahmacharya. Until one is firmly established in the ideal, there is without doubt a fierce inner struggle with both one's body as well as the mind. The Ramakrishna order to which I belong has hermitages in the Himalayas and a few other secluded places. Those who have difficulty in observing their vows are sent there for periods of quiet introspection, freeing them from their usual duties and responsibilities. If the problem persists, they are advised to return home and continue their life in a non-monastic environment. Serious breaches of monastic rule invite immediate expulsion. I've shared with you some of the salient points connected with the ideal of celibacy in the Hindu tradition. We have seen what that ideal means from the Hindu viewpoint, what its implications are, and how it benefits those who embrace the ideal. We also listed factors that are helpful in the practice of celibacy. It's a great ideal, and it is rewarding. It's a rewarding experience to know how this ideal is defined and practiced in other faith tradition. That's why it's a great opportunity today to hear about this ideal from 3 different traditions. We have much to learn from one another. The more we do that, the better our understanding will be of the ideals that we hold dear in our own lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Swami Tyagananda. Our next speaker, Geshe Tsetan, is a monk from Ladakh who studied at Tasha Lumpo Monastery in Tibet until the Chinese occupation of Tibet forced his return to India in 1960, where then he studied at Sanskrit University, completing his Shastri degree in 1974. He also completed his Geshe degree at Dreping Lusaling Monastery in South India. He was a resident monk at the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center in Washington, New Jersey for 22 years, as well as resident teacher at the Manjushri Center at the American Institute of Buddhist Studies in Amherst, Massachusetts. He is the founder and director of the Siddhartha School in Ladakh, where he developed an education program that currently serves 126 students ages 4 through 13. His Holiness the Dalai Lama visited the school in 1998 to give his blessing. Geshe Tsetan was appointed abbot of Tashi Lumpo Monastery by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1997, but his commitment to the school that he had founded forced him to decline that appointment. He is now also in Freeport, Maine, or near Freeport, Maine. He regularly lectures on Buddhist philosophy and meditation at colleges and universities in the New England area, including Smith, Hampshire College, Maine College of Art, Bowdoin College, Bates, Bangor Theological Seminary, and Wesleyan University, as well as at Dharma centers throughout the Northeast. We are happy to welcome him this evening to Boston College to speak from a Buddhist perspective on celibacy.
tu zengi zona tawa tamja pangbe je tambe chuna tun zabe gondam de la chasa to chanchu sinjo rimboche mage pan kigech ke ba nyamba me ba ya kong na kong do pe wara sho. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share my Tibetan Buddhist perspective about this celibacy. So, first of all, I want to let you know I have little language problems. So, I will try to speak slowly and more clearly as I try. And you should listen more, pay more attention. Don't listen and I'm not an American professor in Native Americans. And first I want to give you this Buddhist main idea and belief. Then I will speak about this celibacy. So, as many of you know or not, Buddhist doesn't believe Creator, one. And second is, Buddhists believe all sentient beings, in all living beings, even as a little insect, they have the freedom or opportunity to become enlightened, to become Buddha. Their mind, self is pure, clean, and luminous. But this mind, pure and clean, luminous, covered with afflictive emotions like anger, attachment, jealousy, desire, ignorance. So now you think in easy way. Those are in Buddhist really consider this inner enemy. Okay, inner enemy that cause us to suffer and to circle in the cyclic existence. So, since Buddhism doesn't believe the Creator, those we, all sentient beings, circle in the ocean of cyclic existence since beginningless time, under the control of this ego or the self-concern. Okay? So think this way. Ourselves we think we have freedom and choose our life. But ourselves under the control of the mind. Our mind controls us. The mind itself doesn't have the choice and the freedom. The mind controlled by ignorance, attachment, angers. So we go under the control of ignorance, attachment, anger, then we create the bad karma or bad actions. That actions keeps us continually to circle in the ocean of cyclic existence. Therefore, we need soldier to destroy this inner enemy. So according to in Buddhism, there you can prepare kind of soldier, different like we took in the vows, monks, and male, female, and then also monks and nuns, fully ordained monks and nuns, and novice monks and nuns, then lay person, men and women. Those are particular soldiers to destroy this, the inner enemy. In order to work, to control or destroy the inner enemy, then we need the vehicle to get there easily. So what kind of vehicle we need? Then comes this ethics, the vows. So there, again, 3 main goals to after you are getting liberation from the inner enemy. One smaller goal is to get free from, we call the lower realms, escape the suffering of animals and suffering of we call the hungry ghosts and suffering of hell realms. Their main goal, main purpose to escape those suffering. Those kind of groups works, take this vow, work carefully how to overcome from these problems. The second types of groups who's not just enough to overcome from that kind of problem, but they don't want to live in the ocean of cyclic existence under the control of afflictive emotion. So they want to get freedom and liberation. So therefore we call the soldier called the hearer and a solitary realizer who really trying to get independent from themselves from this enemy, ignorance, attachment, anger. Then the final, the highest, the more powerful soldiers who's really looking to complete independence. Not enough to get out of cyclic existence, not enough to get special, high, which is a special kind of, I don't know how to put it, not enough for them to be released from suffering of lower realms. Okay? They are not enough to them to just free from suffering of cyclic existence. Their responsibility, their job to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Therefore, they're looking to reach enlightenment themselves. In Buddhism, as I told, the mind itself is pure, luminous, but that mind, pure, luminous mind, covered with ignorance, attachment, jealousy, anger, so on. So, as I told, they need this, the basic, the vehicle, the ethics. The ethics now, let's say fully ordained monks and nuns, they have to follow 253 vows, rules. And these novice monks and nuns, they are 13th mainly. Then laymen and women, they have to take this 5 vows if they want. They choose freedom. Those who really want to come, want to practice, up to them. Their teachings, the teacher not going to force them. If they want, up to them. They think able to do it or not. As I told, if you really want to fight your enemy, this is the best opportunity you have. Therefore, you have to give up many things in order to become better soldier. You become even an ordinary soldier. You have to stay behind your family, your friend, your country. You have to go whatever this had orders. Similarly here, these soldiers are very good soldiers. Without harming this, the sentient being, without affecting this, the environment, try to relieve or release beings from the control of ego. In order to control the ego, to destroy the ego, ordinary weapon doesn't work. Now you need this weapons and a bullet, strong one. Right on the, on the vehicles, ethics. Carrying on the concentration, meditation weapons. Try to shoot the ego, the wisdom knowledge. The wisdom only bullet work to cut off the root of cyclic existence. Are you able to follow? It's okay? Therefore, necessary that those who become monks and nuns, not mean they not able to take care of themselves. That not mean they don't like their family or friend. That not mean they're against this sex. They really based upon their mind, compassion, love, cares other problems. Therefore, they reduce their own life, give their life for the benefit of others. In Buddhism, really you want to please the Buddhas or the divine beings. No other way you please them except pleasing sentient beings. What is divine beings or the Buddha's main goal, main purpose? Why they get enlightenment? In order to help others. Therefore, their job, that is their job. If you able to help sentient beings, those who are suffering under the control of ignorance, that really please the Buddhas. Therefore, one Indian teacher, Shantideva, said, in Tibetan, I recited, Senjan Guja Matokpa Yawa Geve Tabjan Met. No way to please the Buddha except you are pleasing the sentient beings. Understand me? Think, another way. If you try to make your mother happy, offering her or helping her, food, shelter, clothes, that's not enough to please her. Another way, you're just torturing her other children. Okay? Then you try to help her, it's not going to please her. Really, you want to please your mom, the way you can please her to take care of her child. Pay attention, make them happy. Similarly, we are the child of Buddhas. You are really able to have the child, then you really are pleasing Buddha. Buddha doesn't need food. They don't need light. They don't need your service. They're rich in enlightenment. Why are we making offerings? Why are we making follow on his teachings? Why paying respect them? We knew they give us. The Buddhas give us this method, the technique, how to free ourselves from this cyclic existence and how to help all sentient beings. Therefore, we making offerings. The offering is not just, as I told, they don't need benefit for ourselves. In order in Buddhism, to reach enlightenment, you have to accomplish both the method and the wisdoms. The method, which is making these offerings like food, water, tea, whatever you eat. It's not the Buddha, but that really helps you to overcome from stinginess. The stinginess is another our enemy. Okay? So making this learning how to become good practitioner. Okay? If you shave it, dress as monk is not, that's not enough to become real monks and nuns. But one of our teachers said, if you read this in Dalai Lama, my land and my people, they give this in the courts. Said, those who really mentally involved with some cyclic existence in the world, physically spends entire time in the cave. Chef, easy to know, you just depend upon simple food, simple cloth, not just stay in. Then mentally involved in the samsara, then they said, you're not different from the groundhog. Understand? Same as the groundhog. So I have to make, we human beings have the much intelligent, better than animal. So it's not enough to shape. Shaping is good one way, but not the final, no? Why we have to shape? Not being the monks is lazy to wash every day. Why we have to shape this? That mainly you are devoted your time, for the benefit of others. Therefore, you overcome, start to be less activities. If you have in your beautiful hair, you have made proud of your hair, looking in the mirror. Takes away your man away, how the desire, pride comes. Therefore, shave it. It does not mean being bald head to fight you, no? Mean give up your desire, attachment, the hair. Give up your pride. Become very simple. Then you have more time to practice. Your compassion, your love, look forward to rich enlightenment for the benefit of others. Otherwise, you being that does not mean also you cannot do without becoming monks and nuns. You can reach enlightenment even being as a householder. Again, these books say like a Tibetan Lama called the Milarapa, the Marpa. His father, husband, teacher, but he reached enlightenment living in the house. The renouncement here, what the renouncing mean? Renounce mean not mean to give up your family, friend, others. Renounce means you give up the desire, the attachment. That's the real renouncing. See the faults of samsara, the cyclic existence, that really keeps being entirely in the ocean of cyclic existence. When we are tied there, then we have to circle. Therefore, their mind, when they become a monks and nuns, they have to have certain kind of renunciation and compassion. Understanding me? It's okay, my language understanding? So, think therefore, in our tradition, very important monks who become to stay in the monastery. When you become monks and nuns, you got new name. We call them Kimna Kimmepa Rabdu Junga in Tibetan. Mean you are home to become homeless. Do you understand? Live in home. You have to, of course, you work just for for the lot of activities to doing that. To take care of your wife, take care of your family, just thinking your own sake. Now, in Buddhist way, the family is much bigger, more important, the big family than this small family. Small family, one family suffer, that not affect the world. The bigger family suffer, that affect the world. Therefore, who spend time in the monastery, relying upon food, just simple food, simple cloth, that gives them more time to work. improve your compassion, improve your loving kindness, and develop your altruistic mind. You understand? Therefore, it is necessary to learn this meditation technique as I told the weapons. Who's carrying on the weapons? Meditation control the mind, not let way. Since beginning last time we are going under the control of the ego, therefore we have to suffer. Now we have the great opportunity, being as a human being, we have in Buddhism called what we have the soldier, the monks, nuns. The ego is not permanent. The ego is changeable. Then there is a technique or method to use it to destroy the ego. We have the opportunity to learn this technique. If someone do not know how to use the technique, then we cannot stop the ego. We don't have the opportunity, we cannot learn the technique. In that there is no teacher is valuable or the teaching is not valuable, we cannot stop the ego. If this ego itself is the permanent, we cannot stop it. Luckily, ego itself is impermanent, changeable. We have teacher who knows how ego is deceitful and the worst enemy. Understanding why I'm using enemy means the enemy means someone who destroys our opportunities. This inner enemy, the worst, not only destroy your physical and temporary opportunities, that ego destroy your next love after enlightenment. Therefore, we have to be more, need the technique, the method, the opportunities are there. Therefore, one Indian teacher called is Dharma Kirti. He said, "Stagni chiram tab mechiri, yangna tab nimishi chiri." Mean the ego self, is it permanent? Or is there no method to stop it? Or nobody knows how to use it? So somebody, as I told, somebody knew there is technique, there is permanent. So therefore, we make effort. Instead, despising ourselves. Instead, blaming others. Look inside. Therefore, we call Buddhism, look inside, care more inside. If you ever to conquer from inner enemy, then you don't have to worry the external enemy. The Buddhas, who's conquered, who's free from both inner and external enemy. Buddha not try to stop the external enemy. External enemy, no way to stop it, no finishes, no way to finish until sentient beings are not finished. Therefore, try to reduce, stop internal enemy that gives you opportunity to reach enlightenment. That's open for you work for the benefit of others. That not mean Buddhism into reach enlightenment, then go away to relax yourself. Yeah? The Buddhism, to become Buddha means to come back, help sentient beings. Therefore, the compassion, what caused us to come to in the cyclic existence, the appeal to emotion and actions. The Buddhas, what caused them to come back again here? Their loving kindness and compassion. The compassion caused them to come again to work for the benefit of others. That not mean Buddha come in this world have to suffer physically. They are different, but mentally they come with physical act as ordinary peoples, ordinary person, ordinary beings. Mentally they are divine beings, you cannot say. No? So that is Buddha's specialty. Therefore, Buddha have this open. When you reach enlightenment, become Buddha, then everything is open for you. You don't have to think, you don't have to worry, you don't have to, everything. Therefore, we make effort to reach ourselves to enlightenment. Two purposes. One, we get all the knowledge. Secondly, open for us to work for the benefit of others. In Buddhism, others are all beings, doesn't matter, enemy, neutral beings, friends, or beings our mothers. So actually we're killing each other, that means killing each other parents. Let's say in Buddhist, their story, one of the Buddha's disciple called Shariputtara. He went in the village for begging. There was, he met in the family, one family who's cooking fish in the pot. Then there was the dog, expecting to get something from him. Then he's holding his child very cherishly in the arms. The yogi, Shariputtara, realized, saw through his clairvoyance, the fish were his father, who used to fish behind the pond, the fish, and that desire, attachment, caused him to be born as a fish. Okay? The mother, his mother, who have attachment with the family, so she was born as a dog there. Okay? So there, now he's cooking his father flesh and throwing stone on his mother's head. What he's doing, carrying cherishly, his enemy who loved his wife, he get angry, kill it, because the desire be born as his child. So now he's carrying very cherishly, happily his enemy in his hand, and cooking father flesh and throwing stone on his own mother. We do not know who is our enemy. We consider our mother, our grandmother, our grandfather, or someone. We really don't. Therefore, it's necessary, important to take time, spend it, try to improve it. You understand? So we all have this opportunity. Therefore, then I don't want to talk want to take time. This is not with me. So again, keep in your mind. Don't worry. First of all, make yourself happy, useful, meaningful. You are happy. You are calm. You are peaceful. It makes your family happy and peaceful. That helps your relatives, your friends to be peaceful and happy. That helps to have your society, your country. If you are not happy, you are suffering, that causes your family problems. The family get uncomfortable, that causes the society problems. How we creating problems? How we have also power to bring peace, changing ourselves. If you try to change others, no way. Therefore, the target is not outside, target inside to destroy. The bullet not used there, used inside the enemy. Destroy the inside enemy, then you get what's the rich enlightenment. The historical Buddha, Siddhartha, who reached enlightenment, not just destroying the external enemy, he just overcome inners, using his weapons, love, concentration under the Buddha tree in Bodh Gaya, to practice, speed up his compassion and love that helps him to reach enlightenment. Now we call him Buddha. But sometimes we all was family him, but he makes effort, learn how to free himself and how to have become Buddha. We cares ourselves, we don't care that that keeps us continually to suffer in the circular existence. Therefore, please, no, something I did wrong, I mean, not been here, just I tried to give my idea, a Buddhist way of the thinking. Not men concerned, just start with yourself, you enjoy, you realize your life is very meaningful, useful. Don't feel I'm useless. Don't feel don't go yourself under the control of depression, under the control of ignorance, under the control of attachment, to become more intelligent. Notice coming, the depression, immediately try to use the weapons. Okay? To notice you are going under the control of desire. Notice immediately to use attachment, what's the detachment. Notice you are going under the control of ignorance. Think, contemplate, everything is dependent upon cause and condition. Nothing exists according to in Buddhism. Everything is dependent upon cause and condition, depend upon some things. You cannot find someone who's there standing without depending. So thank you so much for your.
Thank you, Geshe-la. We will take about a minute just to stretch, and if some people have to leave, that's fine. And then we'll come back together for some questions and further comments on the issue of celibacy in a comparative tradition. Why don't I start with one? I think that, I forgot. I'm learning pronunciation, too, now that I know the meanings of names. The Swami Tyagananda, Swami, okay, made the distinction about how in the Hindu tradition there is a distinction between the monk and the priest. And Father Gray talked about celibacy as it's expressed in the canon law, particularly of the Catholic Church, and it has various components. And I just wondered if anybody would like to respond. It seems to me, this is more of a comment than a question, that one of the difficulties is that we have required for ordination, at least in the Catholic Church, something that we're told by canon law and other is a gift given to someone. And so how can you require someone to have a gift? And perhaps it's because we don't have the same distinction that, in a certain sense, the priest must take the vow of celibacy, at least in the Catholic Church. And so we have some priests who are monks, but we have other priests who are not monks, but they still must take the vow of celibacy, which was an interesting fact to hear that it's distinct within Hinduism. And I just wondered if, my question is really for Howard Gray, whether you think that this is a good combination or not a good combination.
Well, let me start a little different. I mean, the question is an important one. I had to teach a Saturday workshop to the diocesan seminarians in Cleveland on celibacy. And really the only way that I can get to it is I'm not a diocesan priest. And the discipline of celibacy that's imposed on priesthood is not really my gift. My gift is to be a Jesuit, and celibacy becomes consecrated chastity, which you take precisely as, that's why I wanted to stress this triad of poverty, chastity, and obedience as being the characteristics of a communal life lived in apostolic service. And it's almost impossible for me to talk about one of the vows without reference to the other two. And it's impossible for me to talk about them except out of the tradition of an order that is basically oriented towards action, towards doing things, towards service. And I realized as time goes on, that's a different lifestyle, and it's a different energy in the way in which you address people. And so what I've done with the seminarians is to lay out as much as I can and understand it, what the church's expectation is in terms of conduct. And frequently enough say, your apprehension of this as gift is something you're going to have to find in your prayer, in your life experience, and in the direction you have with your own superiors. I honestly don't understand it because it's not my gift. And I think the fact that it can be unimposed by the church in many ways is an anomaly that, although we use the language gift of God, we're also saying that it's an imposed gift of God, and I have the same problem you have. I think a young male who wants to serve within a diocesan structure, frequently enough, my experience has been, accepts the obligation of celibacy, but doesn't really feel called to it. They want to honor it, they want to live that, it's part of what you take as the total package. But that's why when you begin talking about it, I move immediately to case studies. How do you handle a whole series of cases so that you live this with integrity, growing freedom, and growing understanding, and maybe over time, the imposition of the gift really becomes an acquired gift from your life, and you discover it that way. I mean, I'm just being truthful with you. It would be much better if you had a diocesan priest here to tell you how he has acquired that kind of personal spiritual integration out of the imposition of this gift of celibacy, as it's called. I can't witness to it in the same way. It's not been my experience, and I find it very difficult to do this. When I was here years ago as rector at Weston, I used to go over to the seminary when it had different leadership, just for the people who were on the eve of ordination. We would have one night in which nobody was around except the seminarians. We'd have dinner, and we had a good hour and a half to 2 hours of honest discussion. None of the questions that I ever got in those 5 and 6 years of doing it were questions about the gift. They were questions about the discipline. So you do what you want with it. That's not disparaging it either. It's just trying to be very honest about how I want to answer that question.
Yes, can you come to the microphone because we're taping this, or we could bring the microphone to you maybe.
Maybe you speak very loudly?
No, that won't carry.
Thank you. I have a confusion in my head because if the church had only one tradition about celibacy, there would not be a problem for me. But we know that we have plenty of ordained Catholic priests of another tradition, Orthodox, who are married. So how is it that the Latin priests have a gift and the Orthodox Catholics do not have the gift? So how do we describe a priesthood that has it without one type of discipline and doesn't have it within the other type of discipline? To me, that's a contradiction.
Well, not necessarily. They're two different rites, for one thing. And the canon I read was from the Latin Church. And I purposely did not want to get into that because you don't have that much time to do everything you want to do. And I wanted to get out this idea of what's been the traditional interpretation within the Latin rite for the reasons of celibacy, what it's supposed to do in the life of a priest. But you're right, there is another whole tradition that permits marriage, and also a whole group of Lutheran ministers and Anglican ministers who have come in to the Roman Catholic Church married were not asked to renounce their relationships with their spouses at all. They were absorbed into it. And many people raised the same question: is this a selective gift from God or a universal gift from God? You say, well, it's a selective gift, I guess. That's what people have done. The problem we have in something like this is the question is a very appropriate one. I don't have the answer because what we do is we're guessing at the reasons. And then when I do that, I get sinister and think that the reasons have nothing to do with what we're talking about, but have much to do with the style, whether it's liberal or conservative, about the way in which the institutions run. That's what I think, and that's not taking pot shots at anybody. I just think that when you look at it, basically the people who were accepted into the church were basically people who were dissatisfied with things like the ordination of women, the emergence of homosexuals being ordained within their particular clergy or being officially designated as ministers. some of the questions of doctrines. It was basically a repudiation of their own traditions and looking for a tradition that would support their conservatism. Now that doesn't mean they were bad. It just means that these were aggravation points that moved them, and Rome agreed with it. That's what you're living with. And so then people like me are trying to explain and said, I don't know what was going on in their minds, but this is, as far as I can see, were some of the dynamics in the decision. That's about what I could tell you.
Yes. Here. Oh.
My question is to the Swami. You mentioned consciousness. Could you elaborate on that? And is there...
I think you have to stand up.
Is there any relation, have you made any reflection on relating that to the Western tradition, like Husserl and so on and so forth? And consciousness, inner being, of a being, relating to others, etc. Could you elaborate on?
Normally, when we use the word consciousness, we use it in an objective sense. I am conscious of something. Then we need an object for consciousness. But when I spoke about, that's why in the Hindu tradition, we use the word pure consciousness. But pure consciousness is meant not consciousness of something else, but consciousness itself. It's something, this is the best way you can express it in the limited power of a language, but it just means that I really don't know how best to express it other than it's just but it's an experience rather than a concept. I don't know whether I've answered your question, but this is,
would it be like the awareness? We generally say aware of as being consciousness.
right.
So aware of means this being here or X, no.
Right.
Aware of relating to relation
Right.
to that outside itself.
Right.
To the other.
Right.
So it's subject relating to object.
Exactly. So there are three things involved: a person, the subject who is aware of something else. There is the object, which is the we are aware of, and what is connecting the two is awareness. So consciousness itself means the subject and object, the duality doesn't exist. It's just the awareness.
This is the highest state.
Yes, because it is non-dual, where all the distinctions vanish. As long as divisions and distinctions remain, finitude, limitations remain. And ultimate reality, as perceived in the Hindu tradition, is without divisions, without distinctions. It is all-pervading. In fact, the word they used is non-dual. There is no duality, no multiplicity. And that is why that is seen as consciousness itself, not consciousness of something else.
So it's a state, then a state of a being. It's a state.
It's an experience beyond subject-object divisions.
Another question. Joe.
I was going to ask a question myself. I just wondered if you could explore for a moment, all three of you, the commonalities in the different traditions on this point, because it seemed to me that there are certain elements that you all share in perhaps a kind of attachment, the goal of which is a certain kind of freedom, and then it's a freedom that's meant to be to overflow into some kind of usefulness to the larger community. Those might be some of the elements, but
Well, I'll start. One of the problem I have is going to be vocabulary, and I don't want to be intrusive and say people were saying my words, but I was translating in my words because that's all I got. And it's the tie between asceticism mysticism and conduct. Even though I don't know if even I use those words, but by asceticism what I mean is the way in which we govern our appetite so that the appetite becomes constructive and not destructive. Anybody in AA knows exactly what I'm talking about, that if you can't drink because you get drunk and that destroys every relationship you have, you practice an asceticism of withdrawal from alcohol as being a recreational form or as being a food for you. It's no longer available to you, and you feel deprivation, but you do it because it's a way to life and to love. It keeps relationships going. If you're a sexaholic and you realize how destructive it is, you also realize that refraining from inappropriate sexual activity is the only way in which you're not going to go to jail, you're not going to get sued, and you're not going to have to live such a privatized life that you can't do the kind of full living you'd like to do. So we all have asceticisms, but what we were all talking about here is the asceticism of trying to live with an attuned sense of God's presence and of availability to others in their need. Secondly, we also talked that leading to this is some kind of mysticism, the fact that you realize how God is present in your search for God. That it's not a futility so that it ends up a problem, but it's a surrender that ends up in a presence. And that's unitive of what I would say when you talk about consciousness. I was thinking of the unitive experience of mysticism, in which the relationship between you and God have really not been dissolved. You don't think you're God, but it's been dissolved as a barrier, and you feel yourself in union with God. We all spoke about that. And interestingly enough, you notice how conduct came out of that. The way we treat other people is the result of being attentive enough to notice them and godly enough to be a presence that's beneficent to them. And in the Catholic tradition, one of the great tests of every mystic experience is, does it separate you from other people, and does it lead you to love them? And if those two things aren't present, you might have hallucinations, but you sure as hell don't have mysticism. Okay?
Yeah, pretty much second what you said. As I try to see it, if celibacy as an ideal is valued specifically in the three traditions that are represented today, if it is valuable, every tradition has to figure out what besides the benefit that celibacy can give to a person practicing it, what is it that should motivate a person? What is it that those who practice celibacy get, and what is it those who don't practice celibacy don't get? And it can also, I think it's a very tricky question, because a tricky way, even the way it is presented, because it can raise issues like guilt. If the whole idea of celibacy is presented in a way as to say that this is something so special, and then those who don't have that practice or ideal in their life are likely to feel we are missing something, or this is something we are never going to get, and then that can be an additional form of guilt in the mind. On the other hand, if it is said that whether you practice celibacy or not is just the same, if there is no difference at all, then again the question is, then why should this be a valued ideal? So this is a challenge in every tradition which values certain ideals to show what benefit it has, but in what way that ideal can be meaningful to everyone who is a part of the tradition.
Geshe La?
I don't know I get the question right or not, but this celibacy or in Tibetan, those who take this vows, those who not take the vow, the differences is those who took the vow, they get more benefit doing the same things, Let's say you are just pray for God. you don't take the vow, you get one benefit, what you're saying. If you took the vow itself has the power to multiply your prayer, make more stronger. It's similar. Then doing your non-virtuous deeds, those who took the vow, they did something wrong, killing, for instance, innocent gentlemen. Those who took vow, they get double misdeeds. Okay? Those who took vow do virtues, they get double. Those who not took vows, they only get one killing, for instance, one mistake, get the non-virtuous one. Those who took vow, more. So that's for necessary, important, those who are really interested to improve your self to reach enlightenment quicker, then it's necessary to take the vow. Or that means you cannot practice at home yourself. The religion practice is free, open for all, but take the vows not up to the person himself or herself.
So Geshe, just to clarify, can you hear this?
Yeah.
Just what Geshe is saying, just to crystallize that, is that in Buddhist traditions there's an understanding which may also parallel the other traditions, that there's a power to the vow, which is another point. So for example, if you take a vow not to harm, then two people takes a vow not to harm, neither of them actually harm any. Let's say one person takes a vow not to harm, not to intentionally harm someone else. Another person does not take that vow. Both of them do not intentionally harm someone else, but the person who took the vow has another power in their life. That there's maintaining that vow day by day, reminding yourself of the vow. Somehow that vow is a tremendous power, which in Buddhist understanding becomes a tremendous power pulling you through life and even beyond this life toward enlightenment. So it has this kind of almost autonomous power to it. And that may also be a parallel in the other traditions and not to be overlooked in the discussion.
Thank you. Back there, can you come down to use the microphone?
Father Gray, my knowledge of the Gregorian reform is about yay big. What was it about the Gregorian reform that brought about the change in celibacy in the Catholic priesthood? And does it have anything to do with, as I've heard, and it's just something I've heard, does it have anything to do with the inheritance of land coming down from the priest who's the father to the son if they have children? I've heard that that's part of the story. I don't have any idea.
Well, first of all, what I want to suggest to you, because it's not long and it's far more informative than what I'm going to say, is John O'Malley's article in America in December, because it really is an effort in the midst of all this discussion to give a kind of historical prism, and I borrowed a great deal from him. If I read him correctly, there were two elements at the time of the Gregorian reform. One was nepotism, the selling of church property, not selling of it, but the maintenance of church property and so on within a family. And the second one was what we might call licentiousness among the clergy, the having of mistresses and so on. And those two were the main focuses of reform. Now, a subset under that nepotism, the keeping of lands and so on with the family, was the fact that what this did was to enfeeble the giving of goods to the poor, the sharing of goods with lesser clergy, and so it became a prerogative of a family. And then church ownership and church regulation was minimized, and therefore it really just became an extension of a family using the church for family business. And that was the end of the reform. And you do hear people say that the real reason that you keep celibacy is it's an old law in order to give the church more power. Well, I think there probably is an element of giving the church more power, but I don't think it lies there, at least not only there. But that's how he explains it, and I think that makes some sense, you know, and it gives it some kind of historical perspective. Did that help a little bit? Okay.
I think we have time for about one more question. Back here.
Thank you. Following on the question about the similarities between the traditions, I wondered if each of you could speak to an important difference that you see or something that you heard from one of the other speakers that you might take away and think more about in relation to your own tradition.
Sure, that's good. Well, I said to the Swami, and I want to be really very careful here because, you know, I'm learning too, and I don't want to impose what I heard as being what was said. But I wrote down how historically conditioned the Christian experience is, that Christianity is constantly defining itself in terms of its culture. And because its culture is so diffuse, the whole Christian experience is never univocal. It's always being fed in. And that was my experience when I was in Asia, is that Asian Catholic Christianity is not North American Catholic Christianity when it's free enough not to be that. I've been in a situation where I've tried to get fairly shy Asian people. I said, you got to talk up about your experience. And finally, when they do, they'll say things like, this conference was the first time in which I could talk as a Chinese Jesuit and not as an Irish Jesuit. Because so much of the imposition of colonial powers had really structured the way people lived their Catholic life. And what you suddenly have emerging with the consciousness of a distinct culture is another spin, historically conditioned, but now liberated from the colonialism that had structured it for such a long time. As I was listening, I became more, and I mentioned this to the Swami, that I realized how historically conditioned Christianity is, you know, and that even how difficult it is in a short time that we have here to specify what does celibacy do within Western Catholic Christian tradition. And I said it's supposed to do all these things, but what we're talking about today is far more how complementary it is to marriage rather than how isolating it is from marriage, for lots of reasons. First of all, we're only going to talk to ourselves if we talk only in terms of it being something real special gift nobody else has, because then if someone says, well, we'll watch you, it's like watching a circus performance. I don't mind you doing the high dive, but I don't want to be part of it. Okay?
Yeah, to continue what you said, I found that the approach can be different from the Christian perspective and the perspective of many Eastern traditions, and that could be because of the different concept of time. As opposed to the linear concept of time, in many of the Eastern traditions, we have a cyclic concept of time, and therefore, that is one difference that I noticed. Another thing was, I tried to think whether it's possible to present the ideal of celibacy with reference to, of course, to the world view of the tradition that I represent, but also whether I can express it in a way and in a language which applies to any human being, irrespective of which tradition we represent. That's why I tried to structure it in the way about how the human personality is constituted, the mind, the ego, and what kind of researches the yoga schools in the Hindu tradition have done about what exactly happens, even at the physiological level, for those who hold and this ideal dear and try to implement it in their lives. So I thought that was a challenge, and I tried as best I could to put it in a way that would be applicable even beyond what the scriptures of our own traditions say.
In my understanding, in these three different traditions, the main goal taking the celibacy is to work to follow this God's will to get there, and this way similar. We use instead God, the Buddha, but some you have more opportunity to follow his advice, his teachings, his path. Then in another way, these three, we are just celebrating for what giving up their family, their lifestyle, making more simple because make more chances, times give yourself to focus the path and try to help the others. So in my understanding, we are all talking about something, we don't want this, suffering is same. We want happiness. There are things, no differences in Hindu or Christian or Buddhist or others.
I would be negligent if I didn't want to add one thing. The whole figure of Christ is so important in the Christian experience. And my own experience would be that becomes far more the pearl of great price in my life. That's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I think Christ did it, and I want to be with Christ. That's a particular difference, I think, is the importance we put in the Catholic tradition on the historical Jesus as being an entrance into the transcendent God.
Maybe on that note about the question about differences, and this has been a fascinating discussion. I hope you will agree with me tonight to have a comparative look at why celibacy, but perhaps it could just whet our appetite for some other further explorations, because I'm quite intrigued with what the Swami had to say about the impact of living a life of celibacy. I've been doing that for 30-some years, and how it affects your brain. I've got to go home and think about that a lot tonight, especially since I have class to prepare for tomorrow. But I also think another very fruitful exploration would also be to ask what difference the gender experience of lived celibacy, either monastic or in a more apostolic way, might make. And if I could just suggest, there is a very fine book by my own colleague, Sandra Schneider's, called Selling All. It's part of a trilogy on the religious life in the Catholic Church, which examines the issue of celibacy also from an anthropological perspective, but also precisely from the experience of women who don't have to deal with the issue of it being imposed because of a requirement for ordination, but again are apostolic like the Jesuits, but also the monastic women's experience, which we haven't really explored tonight. So there's much more to be explored on this topic, but I think we've been given a great deal to think about tonight, and so please join me in thanking our three panelists.